I started playing Genshin Impact recently, and it has had such a profoundly negative effect on my life that is the main reason why you guys haven't been getting videos in like months at a time. So, to turn this around on it, I decided I was going to make a Genshin video. But due to the wonderful setup I created at the beginning of my channel, I have to do a lost media video. So to connect these two things, I decided what better thing to do than a Genshin Impact lost media video. Not to say I haven't been enjoying the game, I have been enjoying it, just in a more intellectual way than anyone else on the planet, dead or alive. After doing a deep dive on the cutting room floor regarding the game, I wanted to talk about one of the things that interests me the most about it, which is the characters. I'm most likely not alone when I say that Genshin has a lot more characters than one normal person could come to care deeply for, but I am not like normal people. Anyway, today we'll be discussing the various cut concepts for many of Genshin Impact's characters. I hope you clicked on this video because you already know what Genshin Impact is, but just in case you don't, I will give you a very brief rundown, especially considering that this topic is most definitely going to get its own video, and get one soon. Genshin Impact is an RPG made available in its beta testing in 2020 for mobile, PC, and some consoles. It plays like Breath of the Wild if part of Breath of the Wild's core gameplay was gambling your life savings away. It's a gacha game, cue the canned laughter, in an anime style, with, at the point of writing this, about 90 different characters that you can get, with a pretty much even split between those who are 4 stars and easier to get, versus those who are 5-star characters and a little harder to get based on their limited nature. Every character has a different element from the 7 available in the game, those being Anemo or Wind, Geo being the Earth element, Electro or Lightning, Denjo or plant stuff, plant-based, I don't know how to describe it. Hydro, which is water, Pyro, which is obviously fire, and Cryo, which is obviously ice. Each character also has a different weapon chosen from 5 options, which are swords, claymores, polearms, bows, and catalysts. That's pretty much all you need to know at this point in time, and possibly forever if you choose to never interact with the game beyond this video, which I highly recommend. This game is like my one ring, and I'm more like Bilbo than Frodo. Since there are so many characters in the game, both those who are playable and those who are only there for story presence for the time being, you would imagine that these characters would go through a lot of drafting, from their 2D concepts to their 3D modeling, and finally to their inclusion in the game. I wanted to talk about these different stages of development for a lot of the characters, based on leaked information and readily available documentation of the early game's files and beta testing. Starting with concepts that didn't ever make it to modeling, there's a lot of 2D illustrations that have been made public in some way for many more of the characters than what can be found of actual 3D models and modeling sheets. A few things first. From what I understand, the game's developers hire artists to make concepts for its characters, which are then taken and drawn closer to what they would appear like in-game. When I can point out an example, I will try to, but this is just to say that not all of these 2D illustrations will look like they were made by the same person, but it doesn't necessarily negate their credibility as being real. That being said, a lot of people do make fake leaks, either out of genuinely wanting to fool people, or maybe wanting to see what their character would stack up like compared to official characters, both of which is all in good fun in my opinion. I mean, I've done this myself, but it can make it harder to tell real concepts from the fake ones. I have tried my best to only include those that I know are real, but some of the art floating around out there is still disputed on whether it's real or not. Beginning with characters who had art leaked before they appeared in-game, we'll start with the leaked designs for the pyro god, Maua. The nation that she presides over as a god, or archon as the game puts it, is Natlan, which is based on pre-Columbian Spanish, Mesoamerican, and West African influences, to name a few of them. Because of Genshin's design choices regarding areas in-game and characters' clothing, however, there are also smaller representations for a handful of different cultures within each nation. This is criticized as making Natlan in specific sort of muddy in terms of its influences, and harder to nail a specific culture or identity to its characters, especially given that France, Germany, China, Japan, and Russia all got practically their own nations with no real hitches or line blurring. This is to say that each nation's characters do sort of have a specific look to them, but those in nations like Sumeru or Natlan, and even some elements of Inazuma, may have so much mixing or lack of research in their designs that they can be a little bit offensive or misrepresentational. I just thought I should mention all of that. It is worth knowing. Ahead of Natlan's official announcement and first looks at the nation's cast, a few concept art images began to circulate of Natlan's Archon, specifically this one and a sticker with the same design. I personally was a little quick to dismiss this design as fake, just based on what little we already knew about Natlan, both culturally and specific to the game's story. Most Most important to the debunking of this design was that Natlan was and is supposed to be the nation of war, and nothing about this particular design evoked anything war-related, not even in the fantasy way that Genshin is inspired by. If anything, it feels more like the opposite, with this outfit seeming to be designed through a lens of grandeur and performance, more fitting of Fontaine. I thought, and I kinda do still think, that this was some kind of tester design for a character we might see in Fontaine in the future. If not this exact one, then something similar. As for the sticker, it bears a few differences from the supposed concept art, that being the addition of a red jacket and an overall lack of polish. The sticker seems like a hastily edited version of an existing one, or something drawn over a fan-made base, especially when compared side by side with official ones from the game, but then again, I am not a developer, so I don't know what they would usually look like anyway. If anything, it was some kind of draft, but I don't think it went further than this, to be honest. As of November of 2024, Maua has been shown in game, and is going to be playable at some point in the future. That she's in the game. This video has taken so long that she's already in the game. This is what she looks like, a noted improvement over the leak, but with its own criticisms that I won't get too into here. I will just say, why are you white? Moving on, this one is pretty controversial for a handful of interesting reasons, I'll give it that. In this case, we have quite a few different designs, all supposedly for the same character, Emilie. What we knew about her at the time was that she was supposed to be a renowned perfumer from Fontaine with a dendrovision, and that was pretty much it. From these concepts, we get a good idea of what she roughly would look like, or at least what the general appearance of her clothing was desired to be. Out of all the concepts seen here, this one in particular stood out as the one most circulated, the one that fans liked the best. One of the details that struck people the most was that, if implemented, this design would make Emilie one of the first Dendro characters not to adhere so rigidly to a green-heavy color palette. The design is beautiful and intricate and pretty unique, with no very clear-cut comparisons to other characters in the game. Eventually, Emilie was officially announced, and it ended up being that none of these concepts made it to finalization in their full form, and the design we ended up getting for her didn't much resemble any of the specific concepts at all. Many people were very quick to call her ugly, regrettably myself included, but I have since changed my mind. I actually changed my mind so hard that I ended up pulling for her because I fell in love with her, which was such a good decision. I don't know how I lived without her before. I'm gonna brag about my Emilie a little bit. She's not even level 50, but she's like a crucial support for my Novelette. Anyway, I think the main thing was that the concept set such an expectation that no matter what got put into the game, if it wasn't one of the concepts, and especially if it wasn't this specific one, people were gonna hate on it anyway. I also think that making her green made people angry because their promised non-green Dendro Queen, okay Dr. Seuss, got ripped from them. As for the other designs, I've seen it be said here and there that there may still be hope to see them as other characters, specifically as potential members of the Hexen Circle, which is a coven of witches that holds major significance in the game's lore. Given that these concepts do fit that general vibe pretty well, most notably when set next to characters that we already have in game and know for sure are influenced by the Coven or its members, I think that one or more of these designs could be used for something else in the future. Another character from Fontaine, Clorinde, also had a few leaks, one of which had a similar reception and opinion formed around it as Emilie's. I am not 100% sure these leaks occurred before Clorinde was shown in game, but I do know I definitely saw them before she was made playable. This set in particular is closer to the final design, with not much different about it other than some color palette alterations and some different textures and patterns with her top, her cape, and her leggings. The more interesting art is these two, the one on the left being similar to her final design, although with some more white included, as well as the purple color being warmer. One of the things that people enjoy about Clorinde's design is that she pushed the color expectation for characters with her element, Electro, by using a deeper, more blue-purple rather than the warmer tones a lot, if not all of the other playable Electro characters at the time used. By the way, I know these look like AI, they're not, they're just badly upscaled from the really cruddy pixelated leaked versions we had. The one on the right is the one more people took to. Out of all the leaked concept art, this design is by far the most detailed and has the most interesting choice of colors. I believe Clorinde was being referred to as Captain R ahead of being shown in game, and nowadays, when people talk about Captain R, it's usually in reference to this specific design. I wish this concept got finalized. I'm not saying I don't like how she looks now, I just like this idea better. That's usually how I feel about a lot of these designs. Making his playable debut alongside Clorinde, Sethos is a character that was recently added to Sumeru, and from my knowledge, is the first character from that nation not to have been a part of its release here. What I mean by this is that he wasn't part of any of the main story or additional content for the duration of Sumeru's debut year. I think it's for this reason that we were able to get a significant leak ahead of his addition to the game, the leak in question being this image of a Catboy. Rule of thumb, do not dangle a Catboy in front of the Genshin fandom if you don't intend on actually adding him into the game. Saying that people were outraged when this design never made it into the game would be a gross understatement. This is the design for Sethos that did end up in the game, and I have to say I do actually much prefer it compared to the leaked art. I've seen some people saying that this concept was never actually intended to be Sethos in the first place, but I have two theories based around the concept art that I think have some footing to stand on. The first of which is that I don't agree with that statement. Sethos, even in his final design, is meant to resemble a cat-like inspiration, which is why his eyes are such a vibrant color and why he has such standouty pupils. I also think the general vibe of his hair being a little fluffy and tied back and the shaping of his shoes to somewhat resemble paws are some details I picked up on that I think contribute towards a cat motif, even if the alternative literally had him wearing cat ears. Other details that I think confirm that this concept was meant to be Sethos is that his bangs are the same shape and the hairstyle includes the same braid on the same side of his face. The sash that concept Sethos wears around his waist was instead moved up, recolored, and somewhat mirrored, and the armband and glove on his left arm remained practically unchanged. My second theory is that this design was possibly recycled or riffed off of in a way to make Seth, an actual Catboy character from another of Hoyoverse's games, Zenless Zone Zero. I don't really have any strong reason to believe that this is true, other than the two sharing similar hair shapes and colors and obviously the similar names, but there are other examples of possible recycling that I end up talking about more in the video. Next up, we have a character who, at the time of writing this video, and probably at the time it gets uploaded, is not playable, but has been seen in-game as a story-relevant NPC. This is Skirk. Small rundown of who she is just because it's important to know for the purpose of understanding her design. She's supposed to be a resident of the Abyss, for all intents and purposes the dark, scary part of the world that Genshin is set in. For comparison, these are some enemy characters in the game that also hail from the Abyss. Skirk is supposed to be intimidating and dangerous, a very skilled fighter who taught Malicious White Boy everything he knows about fighting, and if you know a lot about Malicious White Boy, you get why this is a big deal. Anyway, this set of concept art leaked shortly ahead of Skirk appearing in the game, and this one in particular leaked long before that. Most, if not all of them, resemble Abyss enemies that we've seen in Genshin, so none of them in particular are very far-fetched or feel out of place. Similarly to Emilie, I think that any of these designs would have worked, but the one most preferred was this one, and I agree with that sentiment. I think it fits the best with the sharp protrusions and the heavy usage of dark blues contrasting against the lighter, almost glowy parts, matching the look of the Abyss enemies in the game. So, imagine everyone's surprise when this blindingly white, light, no contrast to be seen for miles looking design walked out on screen. Almost everyone agrees that this design sucks, even if we didn't have the concepts to compare it to, because we still would have had other enemies to compare her to. I get wanting to make her stand out more from them, but it's not like she wouldn't have anyway, she's playable. There's an argument floating around that has a little bit of merit to it that she looks so out of place on purpose, because she might be used as another bridge to cross Genshin's universe with the universe of Hoyoverse's other games, which I do get, but I think that it still could have been achieved with a more fitting design. These next two I'll cover together since they released at the same time, those being Gaming and Xianyun. A few designs were leaked before they were added to the game in February of 2024, the latter of which had much more artwork leaked. I am not completely sure if all of the images I'm showing were ever confirmed to be real, or if any were absolutely confirmed to be fan-made fakes, but I do know that this particular one is indeed real. Gaming is based on Chinese lion dances, and that detail makes up a lot of his character, and thus a lot of his appearance. This concept leaned heavily into making Gaming himself look like a lion, even being seen in some small designs as having lion ears and animalistic eyes. The blue coloration and patterns are based on a specific lion head used for dancing, and I think that a blue pyro character would have been really cool, possibly with blue flames. But at the same time, I don't know for sure that this design would have ended up being a Pyrovision character. The overall silhouette of the hair, the shape language with the pants and the jacket, and the general inspiration stayed the same for his final design, except with pretty much inverted colors, being more orange and black rather than blue and white. As for Xianyun, the concept art isn't much different from her final design, other than some color alterations and some details being changed. Given that her design is based on her animal form, which is a white crane, there are a lot of details that suggest such here in her concepts, with mainly white clothing, flared pants, and a feathery cape. Her silhouette also remained practically the same, except the pantsuit was ditched for whatever this is. In black, mind you. Where did she go? Where did this go? At the end of the day, I do enjoy her final design. She's way too pretty to be a Hoyoverse character. She looks like she's about to tell me
I feel like a fucking celebrity in this town.
And I love it. I'm gonna speedrun a handful of leaks that I'm like 80% sure came out after the fact of the character being added into the game, simply because I think they're interesting, and while I can't make much conversation out of them, I still wanted to acknowledge them. The first set is a few different designs for Femine, a diver with a cryovision from Fontaine. I still see a lot of arguments about whether or not some of these are real or fake, but to be fair, my source of said arguments are just random one-off comments on Pinterest claiming that they aren't real with no proof or backup, so I thought I would just include these ones anyway. This specific set seems to be the most credible for reasons I'll get into in a second, but the main thing that sets this one apart is just how different it is from his final design. Not only is the silhouette entirely different, not only is the silhouette entirely different, his hair color stands out a lot more, and the color palette of his clothes is a lot more saturated and vibrant. Based on both Femine's personality and what he spends most of his time doing, I think that the softer, less busy palette they went with fits him much better. Even the progression they made in the second set of supposed concepts is a lot closer to what we got, and a lot more suitable for the character. I really like this one in particular. Even though it isn't that much different from the final version, I wish they'd saved a few of the details they'd used here. For example, the armor or whatever it is around his knees does a lot more to enhance his silhouette and balance him out, especially compared to his final design where there's a large expanse of his legs with nothing going on. I do understand that he's only a 4-star character, so he doesn't need to be as detailed as a 5-star might be, but I still think that they could have included a few more details. Other than that, I think this concept design does a much better job of breaking up the dark colors and actually makes him look more penguin-like with the white stomach, since penguins are very prevalent in his design even as it is in the game. I can't be entirely negative about it though, because I will say I much prefer his hair in his final design compared to what would have been used with this concept. Mom said we have Yuri Plisetsky at home. Pivoting to a different nation to talk about a character I really like, Heizou, as his pre-release was very complicated, as distant as it is now. Before he was ever put into the game in July of 2022, a leak started circulating that had him as an Electro character. I have the gift of hindsight in this situation, especially given that I wasn't even that into Genshin when I saw this image going around, but this one did actually end up being something fan-made as a prediction for what he'd look like, and has since been turned into the original artist's OC, which I think is really cool. I would do anything to get my Genshin OC to become as popular as this one did. When Heizou finally did make it into the game, he ended up as another element entirely, having an animo vision and looking like this. A lot of people don't like his design, but I actually really love it. I think it's cute. Other than that, Heizou had some concept art that I think came after his edition, that being this image. Obviously, a lot is different, most notably using a taller male model and more of a dark and brooding vibe. While a lot of the color palette is generally the same, I think the green in there adds a lot where I think the final design could use some. His hair color is different, the arm guards are a bit shorter, but they actually did end up keeping these in some capacity, in addition to the patterns on his pants and his coat thing. If you kind of squint, the bottom half is sort of similar to the end design, just longer. However, and this is the most interesting part to me, I have reason to believe that this design got recycled into Risley. Not only are both Heizou and Risley's occupations pretty similar, meaning they very well could share the same vibe with no issue, but you might notice Concept Heizou's model and hair coloration are pretty strikingly similar to Risley's final design. Coincidence? Probably not if this concept art is real. I think that it most likely was recycled for Risley, a lot how I think the bottom part of Femine's concept art was recycled for Kaniche eventually, at least the general idea of it and not the coloration as much. As for Risley, he had some concepts of his own leak ahead of his release, and while a lot of them are closer to his final design, oh my god, were his concepts so much better! I will say that I'm inclined to believe that this version of Risley would have been a pyro character just because of how Genshin treats its design conventions, so an element switch might have required a revision of the design, but I don't think he needed to be changed as much as he was. The dark by Genshin standard skin and the eye patch would have been so cool. I'm not saying I don't like how he looks now, he's one of my favorite characters in the game, both in terms of his personality and design, but I mourn what could have been. Almost through, I'll cover these next few quickly because I don't have as much to say about them, since the following concepts were all leaked or shown off after the fact of the character being added into the game. Starting with another character I like a lot, here's a few different concepts for Itto versus his final design, of course. I think his current design is perfect, I love him so very much, and I'm not biased at all, but I would like to see these concepts maybe reused for something in the future, specifically the color combination with the gold and white contrasted with the black and red in the design, probably for something else earthy and geo-related. Small model Itto would have been so funny. Moving on to designs that got official renders and even rough 3D models, a batch of characters were leaked ahead of Inazuma's addition to the game. I'll only be covering those that had the most major changes between this leak and the official release. A lot of the time, if designs get to the point of modeling, they're either going to be the final design or undergo minor alterations, with these particular models being referred to as beta versions. Most notable of the beta versions seen here is Kokomi's. At first she was known as Mimi and she looked like this. While she still retained a clearly ocean-themed design, she had shorter hair, more of a defined dress, and lots of drapey, ribbony elements. I really like this design, even if I do have a few nitpicks about it where I think it could have been mixed a little more with the finalized design, but I understand why this design ended up getting changed in the first place. Especially in comparison side by side with the final, it's a bit on the warmer side, which I think detracts from the specific vibe I think they were going with for her. As for Rosaria, I don't think much of this design was changed other than giving her some tights, which I actually think did a lot to break up all the light colors in there from a general design standpoint. Similarly to this, Shenhe's early design here had her with some light blue tights and more prominent white layers on her torso and arms, which were scaled back in her final design, with the blue being replaced by a more cohesive black garment and the silhouette of the white parts being reduced. Another change I think was good for the overall composition. All of the other characters here on this page only had minor alterations made to them before they were added into the game, such small details that I don't think they're really worth talking about, but I will try to point them out on screen. That being said, I made this whole video for a very specific reason. One of the beta designs for a certain character is so wrapped up in mystery, such a mixed bag in terms of explanation for why it even existed as it did in the first place, at least to me, that I felt like I needed to dedicate an entire portion to trying to figure it out. This portion will contain minor spoilers for the Inazuma story quest. If you haven't made it at least past there, I will give you a timestamp to skip to. Now that those who have not experienced Peak are no longer here, the character whose beta design I'm going to be discussing is my beloved Thoma, who I could write so much more about but will refrain from for now. In terms of the story, he's the first person to really introduce the player to Inazuma and help them make their way around, someone selfless and friendly and extremely necessary to the progression of the plot and the player's general well-being. He's someone who ends up basically putting their own life in danger and defying a literal god in the flesh to save you, someone who the game describes like this. Someone who is regularly portrayed and described in canon as being a human puppy, and regularly referred to as both a dog boy and a male wife by fans, just all around a sweet dude. This is what Thoma looks like in the game. He looks about how you think someone with that personality type would look like. In terms of Genshin designs, he has rounder, more downturned eyes than a given handful of other characters who share his build type, and his facial expression normally doesn't delve into any kind of negative appearance other than an occasional slight frown in some circumstances, and when you go to change his weapon for some reason, but I digress. I think you get the idea of what Thoma is supposed to be like. So with all of that being said, this is not Thoma! This is not Thoma! Who is this? This isn't Thoma, this is like Travis. I remember seeing the leaks for this design even before I played Genshin. I don't remember what I thought about it at the time. I didn't really care about the game other than thinking some of the characters were pretty, and I remember seeing specific comparisons that he looked like he was gonna be, quote, more annoying than Child, and as an ex-Tartaglia hater who did not like him at the time, even I would have agreed. I hate Beta Thoma so much. Most of the reason why I gave him this entire segment is because from this screenshot alone, he looks like he was gonna be an entirely different type of person. Since I don't have access to any confirmation that anything really was different, all I have to go off of is his general appearance and this specific expression in this picture, and the few other images we have of Green Aura with Fly's Thoma. Starting with physical differences, his hair is a lot more flat, his eyes are more narrow, his eyebrows look weird and blend into his skin too much because they're the same color as his hair, his shirt collar dips a little lower, he has a different necklace, his jacket is cut a bit shorter, and according to the cutting room floor, you could see his abs through his shirt. So he was a whore. The overall cell shading on Beta Thoma is also a little more harsh, and the patterning on his little waist cape thing is on both sides of the fabric rather than only on the back. I did want this video to have at least some thought process put into something, so I was thinking about possible changes with his role in the story because I find it a bit hard for him to execute his original intention of being your guide through processing when you get to Rito, or being a helpful member of Inazuma society enough to form valuable connections he can leverage if he has a personality like that. I say this only because Ito, someone who does have a cocky, brash personality in game, is often seen as a nuisance partly because of this aspect of himself. I don't think it would make sense that the housekeeper to a government family came across in the way that Beta Thoma seems to, so I only have two potential answers to offer for the question that this poses, that being whether or not Beta Thoma would have ended up playing the same role in the story as he does currently. My first theory is that he didn't. If I had to guess, I would place him being more closely involved with Ito, possibly one of his gang members, mostly going based on the horns he wears. Little update on that. I've been vindicated. in thinking that, because there was recently an event which I'm probably going to complain about and make a video about, or dedicate part of the Genshin video to, because I was so upset with it. But anyway, there's a part where a Tanuki compares Thoma and Ito just based on the fact that Thoma wears those horns. I think it called Ito long-horned Oni and Thoma short-horned Oni, and I started doing backflips behind my computer. Anyway, that made me happy to know that they're thinking the same way I'm thinking. That's the only thing I can think of as a fitting alternative that didn't have him as a government figure or something like that. If that was the case, then the most government involvement I could see him having as this version would probably be as part of Kokomi's army, especially given that his final design has dog tags despite it never being mentioned that he was enrolled in any military, neither in his homeland or Inazuma. The only way I could confirm for sure that he didn't work for the Kamisatos would be if I could see the patch on Beta Thoma's arm more clearly, since he does wear the family's crest on that arm in his final design. My other kind of half explanation was that he was more like Luca from Honkai Star Rail, a character from one of Hoyoverse's other games and another character I really like, who I also believe is a pretty fair combination of both canon Thoma and Ito. Luca basically has all of the kindness, selflessness, and loyalty that Thoma has, with the added headstrong and cocky way that I think Ito carries himself. I have a whole laundry list of reasons why I think Luca is a partial clone of Thoma, for lack of a better way of putting it. But yeah, anyway, I think it's entirely possible that Beta Thoma was just the victim of an unbefitting personality that Luca would end up getting instead down the line, and I'm glad that Thoma ended up being reworked, because I honestly don't think I would have liked him as much if he did end up being kind of jerky the way a lot of rumors described him as being at the time. The amount of hatred that I have for Travis here is unquantifiable. I don't even want to imagine he existed. I don't want to think about him any more than I already have, and I'm ready to move on. Last but not least, I wanted to shine some light on some character models that have leaked, but have still yet to be used in any capacity in-game. These characters are all from different regions in the game and were leaked or otherwise discovered at different points in the game's progression, but just for the sake of brevity, I have lumped them all together as a group. These models do still have a very good chance of being added into the game at some point in the future, but the matter is whether or not that future is near or far, if it will even happen at all. Starting with this girl, this design is most likely a character made for Sumeru, based partly on the fact of her clothing sharing some similarities with characters from that nation, with some possible mummy themes to her, particularly the bandage looking wrapping around her arms and leading up to her neck. If I'm being honest, I have the least faith in this design being added into the game, just because I don't think some random mummification themed character would really fit in the current plotlines in Sumeru, or with any of the established aesthetics. Not only would adding a mummy character to Sumeru in general be sort of a stereotypical move, not like they haven't done that to Sumeru before, I think a character having to do with the temples and dead gods and the plot revolving around those in Sumeru would be better off with a different look. Granted, none of the other designs for characters already somewhat fulfilling these sorts of roles are as on the nose as literally resembling mummified icons. If this character is ever added into the game, I think it would be preferable for it to instead be a heavy revision of the design. The hair is kind of interesting, and the game could use some more characters with a skin tone darker than a sheet of paper. This particular skin tone is somehow both the bare minimum and ashy to boot, so I would hope that it gets changed too. I will say that I've seen people claim that Sethos was chosen to be added into the game in place of whatever role she would have filled, which does make sense given what I know about how Cyno and Sethos' powers look and how they're similar to the wrapping pattern on her arms, but one, I don't think her appearance alone is quite enough to get a definitive answer to that, and two, I heavily doubt Hoyoverse and its current marketing strategy would ever willingly give up a female design in favor of a male one. I genuinely think someone at the company would send the entire dev team to hell. Moving on, this next design is a girl from Fontaine that has lovingly been dubbed the Goth Girl for obvious reasons. Much like the previous design, not much is known about this girl other than where she comes from and assumptions made based on her general appearance, and nobody's really sure what role she would fit into in the current story. Based on all the metal pieces and the overall edgy vibe to her outfit, I'm comfortable saying that she most likely works in Fontaine's prison, the Fortress of Meripede, bearing some similarities in color and detail with Risley, who also works there. I want to say there's significant rumors that this is true, and just because I think it's easy to deduce from the design, it's more than likely. The last model is actually a proposed design for a character who has been mentioned a few times both in the game and by marketing materials for Genshin, that being the Deacon of the Church of Favonius in Mondstadt, Dahlia. He's been mentioned in relation to both Barbara Barbara and Rosaria, both of whom work with the church. For being a character that's been mentioned more than the one time, and to hold relevance with an established role in game, as well as other characters in the same collective, Dahlia sure has suffered, being the oldest design on this list, and having not as much been seen as an NPC in the game. It's a real shame, because I think that this design could possibly be one of the coolest ones to come out of Mondstadt if they ever do make him playable. I personally haven't seen anyone bring this up, but I feel like it's such a basic observation that it's more likely than not that someone has, but I noticed that his design resembles the traditional appearance of a demon or the devil, a funny contrast to his position as the head of a church. If you can't see what I mean, it's mostly in a silhouette, with the front of his hat being his little pointy horns, his cape looking like wings, and the little belt thing behind him being his tail. Couple more honorable mentions here are this girl with art that resembles a model mock-up. I think the general consensus is that she could potentially be an upcoming character from Inazuma, and might belong to the name Mizuki, sourced from a list of names provided by a reputable leaker. This design still hasn't been added into the game, but the name Mizuki was used for somebody who was. The fifth design that gets roped in with these other four is a non-model concept drawing of a musketeer from Fontaine. I don't think he has any name or means of identification other than being such, but that being said, I am a glutton for a blonde man on a black and teal heavy color palette. Can we save him? Can we please add him to the game soon? Let's name him Laurent. Can we name him Laurent? He looks like Laurent. The last thing I'm going to talk about is a character model that will most likely definitely never be a playable character. This is Kate, a test model dressed similarly to a Knight of Favonius in a dark color palette with a secondary texture in red. Kate was first found in the files for the initial closed beta test of the game. The few assets of hers that exist in the game include a party icon and a portrait, and of course her model used for testing under the name nudeheroine_type_01. Since she's used as a placeholder test model, despite there being some ability names and a designation of Electro Sword unit for her, she can be seen exhibiting some animation tests for future characters, as well as Jean and Lumine's animations, albeit in a very broken state. Based on her name and appearance, having white hair and blue eyes, the general opinion is that Kate was the initial version of Lumine, one of the two playable protagonists in the game, before the two twins were decided to be their own characters, with Kate being based directly on the protagonist of another game, Kiana from Honkai Impact 3rd. To further support this conclusion, the male counterpart to Lumine, Aether, once had the name Kevin in Genshin's files, Kevin being Kiana's brother from HI3. She's everything, he's just Kevin. Hoyoverse does a lot of weird stuff regarding characters across their games, sharing appearances and personalities to varying measures, so it doesn't surprise me that the protagonists from Honkai Impact 3rd were being considered to stand in as the ones for this new game as well. I have a whole lot more I could say in specific about Genshin's various beta and development versions, so I'll probably end up devoting an entire video to that because, wow, I will definitely be making another video about it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I haven't said anything about it on here yet, but thank you, Every Pony, for 3,000 subscribers. That is so many more thousands than I thought I would ever have, and I'm very thankful for each and every one of you. And hello, Genshin viewers, drop your favorite character in the comments. First one to say it's Thoma, and the reasons why is getting pinned. Mwah. I love you guys. Have a nice day, /afternoon, /night, etc. I will try to upload more. It's hard to write scripts when this game is tempting me. Also, rock, paper, scissors in the comments about what game gets a video first. Honkai Star Rail or Zenless Zone Zero. Okay, bye.